My loving greetings, Vanakkam, Namaste, Prem Namaskar to one and all of you. Today, the 20th of March 2021, is the International Day of Happiness. Happiness is an experience that emanates from our inner state, from the inner world. The external world is a reflection of the internal world. And it emanates from our minds. When there is peace in the mind, there's purity in the mind. And when there's purity in the mind, there is peace in the mind. So when your mind is pure, the peace that sets in the mind then flows into our attitudes, and the peace in our attitudes manifest in our actions. And when that happens, we will experience happiness. But the mind also wants the self to experience being loved, the self being loved, and the self giving love, radiating love to everyone. The mind also craves for significance and therefore wants the self to feel important and recognized all the time, everywhere. In the family, in the community, in the workplace, in the institution, and wherever the self is in contact with groups of people. You'll find that the mind is also wanting absolute certainty about everything. The mind does not like to be kept in the dark. So the mind wants to be well informed about everything. And the mind also likes variety. In other words, the mind does not like to be exposed to the same thing over and over again. If you are given noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and thereafter given noodles again for the next day, then your mind will go into a tiz. So, when the mind is affected, and when the needs of the mind are affected, psychological suffering is experienced. And when psychological suffering is experienced inside, then we do not experience happiness in our lives, because we go into this state of suffering. And the needs of the mind include love, significance, certainty, variety, and so forth. Now, when someone tells you something that is nasty or offensive, and you have not resolved it with the person, didn't put a closure to it, then you'll find whatever nasty or offensive that has been told to you will start playing back in your mind all the time. Whether you are having a shower, having your meal, or even watching television, you'll find that the offensive statements will be playing in your mind. And that is your inner suffering. And the fact that it is playing in your mind all the time, it is taking you away from the experience of life. Because to experience life, you have to be connected with every precious moment and be connected with every activity that you are engaged in. But your mind is going through psychological suffering because of the needs of the mind are not fulfilled. And even if there are conflicts that emerge or unsavory remarks made to you, it's going to affect you. we need to also understand that the people that love you the most hurt you the most. And your inner suffering and your mind also affects relationship, because your mind is nourished and flourished by your ego. And your ego is such that it prevents the self from experiencing the complete truth, and as a result the ego obscures the complete truth from you or obscures the partial truth. So therefore it leads to failure of intelligence, and it causes breakdown in relationships. And because of the ego, the mind, and the inner suffering that is being experienced. But what people generally and conventionally do is try to run away from the pain and the suffering that they are experiencing. And some of the pain and suffering that they run away from, which we refer to as escape routes. They're escaping from the pain, they're escaping from the suffering. And some of the things that they do to escape is blame someone or something. And by blaming someone or something, you're taking the responsibility away from you. But you're experiencing temporary relief, but not a solution to the problem. For instance, if you opened a business and the business failed, you lost a lot of money, then you blame the recession or the exchange rate or even the lockdown, for instance. Some people condemn themselves as a psychological escape route, or some of them justify their failure, their suffering, why they are going through the suffering. Even linking the failure of a business to the lockdown is a justification that these people actually engage in. Others move into self-pity, and then there are those who are experiencing a specific suffering, then go and associate with others who are experiencing the same suffering, and they lean on to those people to get psychological support. That is an escape route. Others use philosophy. Failure is a stepping stone to success. There are those who also react, sometimes violently, because of their inner suffering, and that their reactions takes them away from the pain of the suffering. Then there are those who also suppress the pain that they are experiencing. A teacher, for instance, who is angry with the children in the class because of their misbehavior, wants to scream in anger, but he doesn't do so. And the anger then becomes suppressed at the throat, the vocal cords, and therefore they have a problem with their voice. Many teachers have problems with the voice, not because they are speaking all the time, but because they are suppressing their anger at the throat. So we can see the different psychological escape routes people use. Escaping is not a solution. It may give you temporary relief, and the pain you escape from goes into the subconscious mind as a charge or as a negative program. Even the charge is negative. And the negative charges and programs then impact on the conscious mind. The subconscious mind is more powerful than the conscious mind, because the subconscious mind influences the conscious mind. it drives the conscious mind into action. And the more and more unresolved situations, the more and more programs and charges that develop in the subconscious mind, the more suffering that we are experiencing internally. And the more suffering we're experiencing internally, we're moving more and more away from the experience of real happiness. We need to understand that all these charges and programs that emanate from our subconscious mind, they control our lives, they control our decisions, they control our ideas, and they start attracting problems to us. Therefore, we must stop in our tracks and realize we cannot continue life and keep escaping. The process of escaping is so painful. We must stop running and turn to the suffering and start experiencing it. So we must follow these steps if we are going through any psychological suffering. And if you follow these steps, which I'm going to explain to you now, then we can put an end to our psychological suffering rather than prolong it. Number one, we must become aware of the pain that we are experiencing. And secondly, we need to confront the pain, we need to stay with the pain. Thirdly, we need to undergo and endure the pain that we are experiencing. And then we have to reflect on the incident where we had the pain and go through the pain and the incident. When we go through this process, we discover at the end of every pain, there is joy. For nothing is permanent in this world. Everything is cyclical. So even your inner psychological suffering, even your pain will come to an end. But by going through this process of becoming aware of the pain, confronting and staying with the pain, undergoing and enduring the pain and reflecting on the incident that gave rise to the pain, then you speed up the process of mitigating the inner psychological suffering. So I implore all of you to follow these processes if you are going through any internal issues, conflicts, or psychological suffering. And in the process, you will help to mitigate your inner suffering and you will restore peace and happiness to your inner world. So on this beautiful International Day of Happiness, I wish you all the best and may you find sustained happiness in your lives now and always. God bless you.